Okay, girls, hi again. So this is part two of using practical applications for our washes and actually creating a scene, just to kind of help, like practicing washes, doing them all in just, like in um, a graduated form or whatever is great, and the more practice, the better. But I also find too that going through my past little papers and stuff, what that on one of my many courses that I've done over the years, even as an experienced watercolorist, I still take classes from many other artists, just to see if there's something more, or there's a technique that maybe that that I don't know about that would make things easier. There's always something to learn, no matter what. I'm always open to learn something new. Now, this particular, I was telling the girls last night, I came across, like, I've got a ton of applications that I've done over the years to um, illustrate the different washes, and every class is different. And I like to take that approach because I'm a creature of change. I do like change. I think it keeps us on our toes. But that just goes to also show that there's many different approaches to the same uh, illustration, in the sense of teaching. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But anyway, what I want you to do, I did change the paper. So this is what we did. Remember, I was saying that the paper was very thin, like even just doing this, that's a 90 pound. It is a good quality. However, the tape was a bit sticky here, and it lifted, and I did have a partition there. And when I lifted it, you can actually even see the tape marks. So we have to be really careful about the tapes that we use. I don't use this for my painting, but I do use it when I'm doing experiments or whatever. Now, I also did mention too that watercolor is expensive. So if you're using 140 pound, if you've got, student grade 140 pound, that's great. Use both sides. That way you're not wasting all the paper as you're going through your trial and errors and you're experimenting and things like that. Okay. And like I said, because watercolor is expensive, so don't use your good stuff on practice. So yeah, you can go and buy the cheapy paper for practicing, and that's fine. But when you go to migrate to the better paper, the downside to that is that you're going to see a huge difference in that application. That being said, um, I think you will get the gist of what the lesson is. And as you progress in your watercolor journey, you'll see it and you'll become more comfortable with it. So there we are. These were the flat washes. Remember that happened to me, or this happened to me. Things spilled all over it. So I tried to just make it. This was wet on wet. And of course, the blooms and everything everywhere. But that could also be an interesting, um, you know, um, landscape in itself. As you can see, it even went to the top, and that's kind of built in some cloud cover and whatnot there. Once it's dry, you can go over and add more, some more value and things like that. You can clean this, like the edges here. This could be, you could come in with a little bit of a darker value tone, and that could be in the water's reflection. So it's not, they each have their applications. This one would be more for almost a graphic, a very detailed, obviously that line wasn't all the way across, but you could bring in your, more scenery and things like that. And this here, these actually behaved almost identical, whereas these were wet with a wet brush coming through, just a stroke through, just to see the bleed. And then this one was where I took the sable. I completely took as much water out as possible and wiped that across to see what that wet would do here. Now this was intentional lift, where this was wet, and I came in with a wet brush and pressed down to do a purposeful lift. And then I cleaned it, took the pigment out, and then completely dried that brush out, and then come through with a dry brush for a lift. So as you can see, there is some residue left over. Now you can continue, but you can see how it just brought that pigment right straight across. So working on a drawing where you want to do a lift, you definitely want to, think about your application as you're going to remove some pigment, right? You can tape off or whatever if you didn't want this sort of thing, right? but it can make a myriad of wonderful effects in a landscape. So, and this could, you know, there's a lot of applications, but it's a practice process. It's a water to pigment ratio. It's using and getting used to your tools, your flat brush, your sable. Those are probably the two most common brushes that you will be using. Now, this was the one that I brought as an example. As you can see, it was very, very light. I used a really nice light wash, which is, to me, that's how I like to use the watercolor. I don't like to waste my watercolors too much. However, these did come out a little bit too light, but look at how well the effect worked as to what I was trying to gain there. So I think that it was a much more successful application than what I did just previous here. So this is what we did last night too. This was a carry on about graduating values and graduating washes. Okay, so this was that, you know, the light, the next, you know, this mid-tone light and dark, right? So, and then of course we bring this landscape. This is going to be like, if the light's coming from this source, we'll make that assumption. I haven't indicated a light source. However, by the way that we're doing this value scale, you know, this light, medium, and whatever, as it comes closer to us, though, any object, it's going to be a little bit more detail and a little bit more focused. So also, you know, anything in the distance is going to become more faded and lighter and a cooler tone. So once again, we're going to, you can just kind of draw in like kind of almost like 3 pyramidal mountains, and then this little body of water. Again, it just makes for a simple picture. And this is a Scott Winson application. He's a fabulous watercolor artist. And I just thought that these were really great practical applications that I wanted to share as well. So we will do the wet on dry just because it's, you know, that was the paper. I know we skipped this last night, just went to, you know, these 3 here. But while I'm doing this on, you know, on video, this would be a good review for you as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now, I made the faux pas of having the Winsor Blue Red, which is a staining color. Now, that's okay, but I think for this application, especially when it came to doing these, the fact that it was staining, I think hampered the lesson here on the lift. Okay, so that's why that didn't turn out as well. And then we're going to, so what I want to do is first we'll draw. I'm going to lay that over here. So I got my Winsor Newton French Ultramarine Blue, which is the warm blue, and then I made my little wash from it. Now what I also did is I made a darker, really deep brown, and almost, it looks black there, which is great, would be considered a brown black. So I took my blue, then I took my warm red, mixed those so it was almost like this kind of a browny purpley, and then just a touch of the yellow, and then that mixes up into a nice dark color. So we're going to use that pretty much when we get to this stage. Okay, so you can mix that up and put that aside before you start, and then just that way you've got it ready when we get to that stage. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to get our brush clean and ready to go. And first off, let's draw out that little sketch. So again, I'm in a mirror. I'm going to bring the horizon down a little lower on this one. So about 1/3 up the page. Now, like I said, you can use your ruler because the horizon is perfectly straight. Okay, so we can do that. We can go light. I'm going a little heavy so you can see it. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of put a mountain here, just kind of give it a jiggle so it, you know, just gives it a little bit of visual interest, and just, you know, another little pyramid shape here for the second one. And then the third one, you can bring it down like this. Okay, it can be little, it can be big. Don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be exact. The whole point is that you're doing it. Okay, so, and then we can just kind of, this will be the body of the water side, and then you can just bring that like a nice abstract C around that corner. And then that'll be the land aspect and that'll be the water, okay? So what we want to do now, remember what we did before with the graduated wash, is we're going to take your sable and we're going to have a light wash. So I'm going to put that here, and then I'm going to actually add more water to that. Now, don't forget to have your little test paper beside you. And where did my paper go? Well, it doesn't matter. I'll just put it there. So I probably can add just a little bit more water. And then, so what we got going on here, it's just the mountains. Okay, so see how nice and light that is? We're going to bring that all the way over. Just keep painting and be loosey-goosey. Don't try to be in a coloring mode. Okay, Karen? Mom's here with you. She likes to color. And so there we've got a really nice flat wash there. Now take your hair dryer, your dryer, and get that dry, because it has to be dry between layers. So that should actually dry fairly quickly. Remember the back of your hand to test. See, I got blue all over. I did when before I started. Oh, I still see a couple of wet spots there. So I want it completely dry. Now the thing is too, not to wait. So as I said last night as well, it's one of the things about using a hair dryer in your work. It's good, but it does shift the color somewhat too. Watercolor already lightens when lightens up quite a bit when it's dry, but the hair dryer will also shift the color somewhat as well. And the other thing is you want to make sure it's cooled off before you apply any more paint, because the heat from the hair dryer will speed up the drying part because the paper's hot. And especially if you're looking to do a nice smooth wash, your area will get dry before you're done and you'll have a hard line. I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of a common sense approach to it. Okay, so now this is the way I like to do it. I know Scott Winston doesn't do it this way. What he does is he'll do his darker, then add a little bit more water, do the next tonal value, and then a whole bunch of water to get the lighter. I believe that this is a much more practical and easier way to build up your pigments, because you only have to make your wash once. And then what we do is, remember, we keep that one the lightest, and then we go over these two, because what we're essentially doing is just adding more pigment, right? So then we'll cover up these two, and then we'll get that dry. So get that excess out of there, clean your brush and get the excess out. And then we'll come in and we'll dry that stage. You can already see the difference, right? Like, I don't know if but this recorder mutes out the hair dryer sound, but sometimes it does. So now that that's dry, we go on with the last one. Now, if I had 5 mountains here, by the time I got to the last one, they would all be a graduated value scale. So then we come in with this one. I'm just going to go over it again. And there you have it. Okay. Now we'll dry this. We'll dry this one. Excuse me. I shouldn't drop my hair dryer to the floor because I got to lean way over to pick it up. So as you can see, we have a beautiful graduated scenery, right? So we've got our light, mid-tone, and our darker. Of course, this one here, this is cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is one of the most gorgeous blues on the planet. I absolutely love it. And cobalt blue can actually be a cool or a warm. Depending on which way you want to go, you would add just a titch of red to make that a warm, and obviously a little bit of green to make that a cool, or a violet. Okay, so now what we've got this, you want to make sure it's dry, and it's still a bit hot, but it doesn't matter. So now I'm actually going to go in. I don't need to go to here because this is already watered down. I don't want it watered down. I want to go in and get almost a full pigment going on here, and I'll put see the difference. So what we're going to do here is a graduated. I'm just going to get that pigment on there, and then I'm going to clean it so that I got a little bit of water on my brush. Actually, I want to use a sable. This here is a filbert. It's actually a really nice paintbrush, but I actually use it as a mixing brush. So and it's completely synthetic, but it's quite nice. It does do it's okay, but it's seen its fair share of acrylics. This one is made by Low Cornell. So I've had it for a long time. It's a filbert, number 12. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was this paper. I went to, and I used this. So it's backwards spelling, but it's Layton. And it's a watercolor paper that comes from China. It's a professional grade, 100% cotton, 140 pound or 300 GSM. And I'd heard about it. I've heard some really good reviews. I don't like to use it for the good, like for, practice stuff, but it's the perfect size right now. So I'm okay with it. And the price of this is actually cheaper than your Arches and your Strathmore's. Strathmore or Saunders. Strathmore is a cheaper brand. Saunders is what I meant to say, and or I think it might be in the same price range as your Stonehenge. Okay, so now we're going to come in and we're going to do a follow the bead kind of a wash, right? A graduated wash. So you can lift it up a little bit, bring that across, right? We're going to bring that across. So we have that little bit of bead, clean that water out, right? Pick up a little more pigment, come across, clean it out. So I want that to cover down. So that's really wet. There's a lot of water there. So I'm just going to bring it down. We don't really have the real estate to worry too much about. But I still should have picked up some more pigment right in here, right? When that next swatch that I did to follow the bead, then I should have done that. But because it's so wet right now, I'm able to do that. So what this part here should have done too was taper a bit. So it didn't behave like I wanted to on this paper, and perhaps maybe, but it is now. And I noticed that my line wasn't very straight here, so it should have been, right? Because it's a horizon line. But you can also see that deposit there also makes a hard line when it meets up with that other pigment. So that's okay. This is great, but don't forget we want to clean up. We really don't want our margins to seep in. So clean up our margins, get that excess water out of there so it doesn't go back into the painting. That happened to me a couple of times last night, and that's only because we were running out of time, and haste makes waste. It always does, right? Okay, so that's that. We can dry that now, but I'm just going to move along because you can pause this and keep going. So we are going to do this again, wet on wet. It's just, I just can't stress it enough to, to make a common weekly practice of maybe doing a couple, like I said, use your cheapy paper for it. This might not be enough wash there to go all the way down the page. Okay. So we're going to wet on dry, follow the bead, right? That's my favorite way of doing a graduated wash is follow the bead. Once we get to wet on wet, you have to work fairly quickly. So, okay, here we go. We're not, the sable is not flat, but you got it tilted enough. Right, there's that. Now I got a bead, okay? There, so clean, come in with more, follow the bead, right? More, follow the bead, and that's about it there. So now, because I want to make it graduated, I'm just going to keep coming in with clean water, take the excess out, keep following that bead, even though, right? So here we go. And the color is sort of seeping down, and there I am. And I'm going to take my Kleenex here to clean up. Okay, bada boom, bada bing, that one's done. Now what we're going to do is we are going to do the wet on wet. So you're going to take your flat or your hakey. That'll make a quick wash out of this. I'm going to use my flat because I don't have a hakey. Oh, there it is. I've got a natural hair here, a 1-inch natural hair that matches up with your hakey. I love this brush. I've had this for a long time. You can see that it's kind of fallen apart a little bit, but this is a Winsor Newton series, I think a 955. I've had it for quite some time, but it's a great brush, and it is a half and half. So, and you could tell that too, because when I really get working it stays. So what I'm going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to wet the paper, right? Nice and wet. This won't take long because it's just such a small area. And I'm going to take the excess off and just make sure it gets, see, this actually is a great absorption. So I do like this paper for that purpose. And right now it's it's just ready for me now. And you could do this with a flat if you choose with your hake or the sable, which we've been using all along. So I'm just going to still do that. So I'm going to load this up, and because it's a synthetic, because it's a synthetic brush, so this, I was going to say this actually should be really going because it's wet, right? Now I'm just going to bring in water, as you can see, and all the way to the bottom. And clean up the edges. Pretty quick. Sometimes it's more of a detriment to work this small, but just, practice. I know Karen, you did a fantastic job on your washes with all those squares. You must have used the small. So I actually went up a little bit too high with my tissue and I completely wiped that out. That's okay. I'm kind of like a bull in a china shop sometimes. So here we go. Let's dry those up. Okay, so in this example here, what I did is I had it with the Sabo, the wet on dry and then wet on wet. And this was done with the wash brush with the pigment right in it. And then just when like I wetted it, and then I had my Hakey with the pigment in it, and then went over it. You can do that if you want. Actually, we probably should. Okay, let's do that. So let's wet it down first. Get this wet on wet, and you'll see the difference that it makes. Okay, so that's nice and wet. I'm going to get that excess off of there. I'm going to come in here with this. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to build all of this up on. Okay, I'm going to come in with my wash brush. Take the excess. So you can see how that gets really watered out. I got something on there. There we go. Okay, clean up the edges. That was pretty quick, eh? And then you can dry that real quick. And then now this next stage is going to be a lot of fun. It's a graduated wash done a little bit differently. Okay. So let's get this dry. Oops, sorry. Now I got to go and fix that now. Ugh. Let's see how that looks. So let's get off. Got it right over, almost over my head here, so it's kind of playing a little. So, okay. All right, so now that we've got that done, got it all nice and dry, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a more graduated wash. And okay. So how we're going to do this is we're going to have this upside down. We have a, see where my watercolor, do I want to do this with, okay. I was just kind of looking, no, I did this last night, but I actually kind of forgot how I went about this too. I wasn't sure if I went, like if I wet this completely and then did a wet wash that way, or, so I think what I'll do is I'll just do what I think I remember, because the actual main gist of this is, I actually think I did the yellow at first. I think I did, right? So last, oh, that's a bummer. I'll have to see if I can salvage this. And we're going to still flip this upside down, right? This way. And we're going to take our warm yellow, and it's going to be like, you know, oops, I probably should have added much more water to that, right? All right, a minute here while I, sorry about that, you guys. But yeah, I think I remember how. Okay, so I'm going to take this here and I'm just going to go into the corner. That's really full pigment, so I'm going to take that brush and kind of just that up a bit for one thing. Just take a little bit of that off because I really didn't want that much pigment on there. But see, this is great because now that you can see what I've done here. Okay, so while this is wet now, I didn't really want it this wet though. It's been a while since I did this. That's why I had to think about what the steps were that I took. I couldn't remember, like I said last night, but now I remember. Because I was thinking about that yellow and how this here came about. And I realized that it is actually, this came before this. So I'm going to clean this up here so I don't get in the way. Now, while it's still a little wet, I'm going to take the blue, add a little bit of water, come in with that. It's a little bit too light. Take off some excess because we're working with a small space. And I'm going to actually come through from, and I'm just going to bring it right over like this. Do that bead thing. Gradually, right? Not enough here. Oh, cobalt blue. And, you know, you get used to a certain pigment. And then, no, I didn't make it as graduated enough because, all right, I can bring this bead. Let's bring this down. Bring that down. Pick that up, bring that down. Now I'm going to just come with clean water. Before I get it on the page, bring it down, bring it down. Okay, so now we're going to get the hair dryer on that. Okay, bring that around. As you can see, so the graduation is visually this way. And so we're going to dry that. Right. Okay, so like I said, it's been a while, and really truthfully, it would have been nice if this was just a tad darker, but like I said, I was used to the cobalt, which I used here. You see that beautiful cobalt there? And that's, but it's okay. It's all good. And this was a yellow ochre that I used. So it kind of had a really nice little bleed out here. But it's okay. It's all good. It's all part of the trial and the testing, right? So now what we're going to do is we turn it back upside down, take a piece of tape, I'm going to do this, and bring it to so that this edge here will be right about here. I think it's right about there. Okay. Not too hard, but make sure it's down good here because you don't want it to bleed under. But we also don't want to, I'm just going to take a quick drink here of my coffee. Before I get started. And so once you get that on there, get a little bit of your tissue too. I don't want, I have to find that, I'm trying to rush, and there's really no need to do that on a video, right? I can take my time on this video. I haven't done videos for a while because the classroom, we're typed for only 2.5 hours, but the really good thing about doing the video is you can pause it. So You know, I got to just kind of take a breath, you know, table. And we've got this upside down. So we're going to take that, make that nice little wash here again. Okay. All right. And we're going to do that graduated wash again. Hopefully I've got enough pigment on there. Okay. So make that bead. Okay, make sure you got that bead. Now, the only thing that I'm a little disappointed in is that my yellow, because it was yellow ochre, had migrated to the top. So there was a little, let me see if I can, even though now this is wet on wet, it's going to be wet on wet. I just want to, because I don't have that yellow, I want to make this a you know, a little bit better gradient wash. Okay. Now this goes against everything I said. Don't go back and work it. When you're working with a wet on wet, as long as for it. And so that's why we're able to play with it a little. Like there's, I should keep this actually on an incline though, so that that flows down. Okay. Now, where is my dryer? So we're going to dry that. Okay, let's see how my camera is. Oop, it got knocked again. Not sure what goes on. It must be me when I'm. So we can turn this back around, the upside right, and then slowly peel off that tape. And here you have a double gradated. So the application here is just to show you the myriad of different ways that you can get effects on. So this here, typically with what I wanted here, like what I had going on here, was it gives you the illusion of a perspective, a sky, like the sun, the sky, you know, this sort of thing, or it could be viewed this way, you know, either way, but it's quite a dramatic effect. I did kind of come in with a raw umber on this one too, because I've got it written down here, raw umber, after all like before you do this, and while this is still damp, and then just touch it up with a little raw umber and then turn it and then tape it. And that was just to kind of tease this along into kind of a landscapey look or feel. You don't have to have a lot of details to indicate visually that you've got a landscape that you're doing. So this one here is going to actually be a sunset picture. Okay, so ensure that you've got, that's not quite dry, but that's okay. You want to make sure that you do that. So like I said, you could even stop the video at this point. So what we're going to do with this one here, this last one, is we can take our ruler and do the horizon line. Now I've got this just about, it would probably be about 2/3. So what we can do there, I'm going to see if you want to draw that line in. I'm going to say it. Karen, you asked, do I erase my pencils? Depends. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So what, right? So I'm going to come in with, I'm going to use the same to use this number 8 because I really like using my number 12 when I'm doing washes. I kind of use for when I'm doing like floral, bigger brushes when it comes to doing my landscapes. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to do the dry on or the wet, one of the more popular ways to do your your washes. So I want to make sure I got my bead here going on. Right? You can do that while it's wet. Okay, so see the bead? Okay, so now here we go. Bring this in here again. Come in with the light. Follow the bead. And because I'm using the synthetic, it doesn't hold as much water. Right? And bring that all the way down. Wet. The nice thing about graduating washes or graduate, if it's going to be for water, you know, and that sort of thing. See, I'm kind of playing with this now because I know it's water. It just kind of offers some surface texture, right? See how and so now that's going to draw linear texture on that, right? So let's get a hair dryer. Because we know what the application is, this is where, you know, like I was saying before, once you know the rules, then you can break them. So you still take the approach of the graduated wash. And then once you've got that taken care of, so this is the thing with even the body of water, the shallower it gets, the lighter the blue, and the deeper the water, the darker the blue, right? So in the distance is going to be much darker than the foreground. Mind you, I probably wouldn't have my water that light, but we're going to assume A-S-U-M-E, A-S-S-U-M-E. But let's try this. Excuse me. Excuse me. Nope, not quite dry yet. If I can speed this up when I upload to YouTube, this part up, then I will. So not as even as I would have liked it to have been. That's okay because this is so in a sense it is. So I think that's dry, and we're going to flip it over and we're going to tape it. Sorry about that. I hit the camera tape. I'm going to see if I got one. Nope. I'm going to put my tape. I got everything. I don't know what I did with it, so I got to get it. Oh, there it is. I tossed it across the tape. Oh, I just got the sneezes all of a sudden. So we're going to take our tape, and we are going to. Oh, it's still quite wet. So that's the other thing too. I'm going to let that just sit for a minute because this is kind of live. But you really don't want to put your tape on there while it's hot. As I said, it might, you know, get gummy because of the heat, and then so we want to make sure our edge here is fairly straight when we put it onto here. Nice and straight across the horizon. I know I went a little bit above. I don't get all fussed over it. Now this here is really thick. I'm just going to go in and break that up. This is a New Gamboge, which is a really nice pigment, really nice medium warm yellow. So that's full pigment there. We definitely don't want it that strong. So we are going to come in. So a lot of times, if you haven't had a chance to clean out your water, this is where this comes in handy. And let me see how my camera is. I got to pull that up, just see if I'm still in the picture. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now I've got the tape over this, and then I'm going to just come in and just give that a little bit of a sprinkle there. Take your sable. We're going to do the same thing, right? Is I'm going to come across here like this. Okay, clean it and come in with a clean brush with water and just drag that color. Come in with clean water again and drag that all the way down. Because it says a small area, it's going to happen fairly quickly. And take our tissue. All across the tape. And then we're going to, don't take the tape off yet. We're going to dry it. So remember that mix I made earlier? I'm actually going to take this yellow, don't want to waste it, and put that in there. And it's okay if it makes it more brown, because we're actually going to be using our fan brush now to make kind of a silhouette. You see how nice and black that is? That is awesome, making your own black. These are the warm colors. All right, so adding a little bit more yellow into that actually made it into this beautiful gray tone. Okay. That's the one happy thing that happened for me. Doing it live in the class is it's a lot of fun because the energy is better. Okay, so let's carefully take that off. You can see where I've got a little bit of a white gap and whatever. It's no big deal. I'm okay with that. And you know, there's just a tiny little where the tape, you see that? I mean, if that really, this is just for demo, so I'm not worrying about it. And also too, I could have done a little bit better job on the beading here and bringing that pigment down. And that's okay too. I make mistakes too, but we're doing this together so you can see it's not always, you know, just because I've been doing this for forever and ever, I don't always have success. Okay. Now what we want to do now is we want to create a little bit of our foreground. So, and see here, this little mountain thing here, actually I could do that right now and that'll cover up that, which I think I will do. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little round, you got that small round brush or liner, and you could just take this and, you know, you can make like a you know, a distant, that's a little bit too strong, a distant mountain range or something, you know, or cliffs, you know, when you go up north to our Georgian Bay area and you look off in the distance and you see the cliffs. Yeah. That's what we can do right there. And that's going to just stop right there, just like it does at Georgian Bay. But I don't know, I'm a kind of a little stickler. I like it to taper out. There we go. Okay, I'm going to dry that. And that was a remedial solution for those little gaps. Okay, so now we want to take your fan brush and we're going to use that to make the foliage. So for right now, let's look at building up like maybe a shoreline or something to that effect. And we can start off with that a little watery. We want to. So this looks a bit blue. So I'm going to just a little dab will do ya. Oh. Well, got a little bit more than a dab. Okay, mixing the color. So it's become more of a greeny color now. So I'm going to add more red. Seeing it live here, folks. My mouth sounds funny because I got my toothbrush or my brush in my mouth. Shouldn't recommend either. Okay. It's okay. As long as it's a darker. Just go over that. Okay, let's do this. Get the fan brush, bring it in there, mix that all up, take off any of the excess, and actually mix it in with this. That's a crappy brown, ugly brown. So, but just take, you know, like use the edge of your fan brush, right? Make some rocks out in the water, right? We could do that. Make it look like they're kind of out on the edge there, you know, bring the land. But just, we want to eventually have this covered here because that is going to be a land. Oops, I went over off of that page. Just get too exuberant there. But it's just a matter of playing with fan brush, just kind of making these little creations, right? So now we can get into doing, like, you know, maybe some grasses. I want to get rid of some of this though. Get rid of some of the pigment. And you can kind of come up like this. Pull that up to get some grasses. And then now let's make some foliage for a tree. Just jab around, but don't go in any in a pattern. Kind of just, you know, really give it this, and don't overdo it. When you get hung up on detail, it just ruins it. Okay, I'm not going to go any further than that because I think that's plenty. Now, what I am going to do though is I do want to bring in just a tad bit blue. See that? And I want to add some, add a little bit more, just some contrast, right, to the landscape, because the landscape isn't a flat wash. And then once this dries a little bit, we can even come in, well, it's not that dry, but just kind of come in with some of the darker tones here, just to give it a little bit of a visual interest there. Remember, this is just for practice. It's not a finishing. You're not coloring. You're not drawing. It's just a quick, easy landscape. But what I want you to do too is then you take a wet brush, take off the excess though, and then you can kind of come in right below these little areas here and smooth out. It's called scumbling. And what will happen is it softens the bottoms of these edges, which will give it the idea of it being in the water, right? And it just kind of blends those. I say kinda a lot. I notice that. It kind of. So the whole thing is you're creating the illusion of, right? So there we go. Your sunset. Now we could clearly get more elaborate, of course. What did that take us? Not even 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I will dry this completely. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of a darker. Or I'm going to show you something else. So if you have, I think maybe I can do that. I wonder if it's still here, my little credit card. I did. Okay, so you can use your palette knife too. Wow, what did I do with everything? I had it all here earlier. I'm not doing very good, am I, for having all my goodies in a row here? I'll use this palette knife. But you can come in while it's still damp and scrape away. Actually, that's dry now. The tree isn't though. And I can come in and do some lifts here and there just to remove some of the color. Otherwise it would look dull, right? It would just look, see, I just lifted that there while it was still wet. You can come in with a knife edge, like I've got the little blades. So this is all part of the techniques as well. You can kind of see there he went again. See how that lifted that white spot out there, right? So you can take, right, just scrape away some of that surface, especially if it's still a little damp. Probably should have done that while it was a little damper. And you can carve out your rocks too. So this is dry, so I can scrape the surface, right? And just create a visual interest, right? I'm not going to go into it heavy duty because, like I said already, this was just for graduation practice, gradation practice, I should say, and to get to use these various brushes. So the next lessons, we are going to do some brush techniques and working with some of the other ways that we can create visual interest with our watercolor. Now, there's a lot you can do with just the brushes that you have on hand, but I like to do little exercises using, making it a challenge. So I'm getting to know your tools, right? So your tools are everything. So like say do a tree with just your sable, right? Do another tree with your Heike brush. Do one with your mixing brush, and do one with your, your little liner. So there you have it. You've got another nice little example. So write on them that this is your value and wash. This is your wet on dry, your wet on wet. And this is your wet on wet with your Heike loaded with the pigment instead of wetting it and then coming in with a sable. You're wetting it and then coming in with the color right on here. This was taping it off. We started first with the yellow. I could have done more and brought that all the way down, that yellow. I really would have liked it to have been at the top. And then once that, while it's still damp, then you come in with the blue and make a gradation over top of that all the way down. And then you flip it over and you tape about, it was probably about a third of the way up, and then flip it around and then do a gradated wash from there to the top of the page. This one, same thing. We did the horizon 2/3 of the way up, made the gradated wash, wet on dry, follow the bead method. Then we dried it, flipped it over, and taped it, and then did our yellow, our warm yellow, gradated wash. This could have been a little bit more gradated, but that's okay too, though. It's, it could be even as the sun is just set, so it's going to be the brightest at the horizon anyway. And then once we get that dry, then we'll come in with our kind of almost like a silhouette, at dusk or whatever. You take a picture out at sunset and everything in the foreground is all in a shadow, more like a silhouette. But you can see that there's a lot of visual, whoops, there we go, right there. Visual interest in the foreground here, little rocks in the shallow part of the water, and then all of this done with your fan brush. So happy painting, and practice, practice, practice.